You leave your warm modern room with central heating behind forever and are transported back to the distant year of 1250. You stand before a massive stone fortress in the midst of a cold and gloomy January. An icy wind howls across the desolate landscape, and the darkness of winter is rapidly descending upon the land. Your usual light clothing offers absolutely no protection against this bone-chilling cold. This story will not present you with a romantic fairy tale from a book, but rather a brutal daily struggle for physical survival. Most people today mistakenly imagine medieval castles as luxurious palaces filled with gold and endless feasts. In reality, the harsh European winter turned these stone giants into massive dark refrigerators. The actual sensory experience of an ordinary 21st-century person inside such a structure would be truly terrifying. You'll feel the icy dampness seeping deep into your bones within the very first minutes of your stay. Let's step through these gates and find out why this single night could be your last. The heavy smell of rotting straw and damp, cold stone hits your nose right at the main entrance. There are no familiar light bulbs, convenient light switches, or other basic comforts of home life here. Only the pale, flickering glow of a single tallow candle attempts to pierce this thick, impenetrable darkness. In the far corners of the corridor, your ears clearly pick up the constant rustling of tiny mouse paws. Welcome to the harsh reality of the 13th century, where basic thermal comfort remained an unattainable luxury. In this video, we'll take a detailed look at the sounds, smells, and tactile sensations that accompanied life in this stone prison. You'll learn exactly how the human body reacts to a constant indoor winter temperature of around 0 degrees. Our narrative will strictly follow a chronological timeline from sunset to the first rays of morning light. Get ready to discover the dark and unappealing side of medieval architecture, the one that popular Hollywood movies always hide. Let's begin our countdown into this icy and terrifying winter darkness. Back in the 10th century, European castles were primarily wooden defensive structures built on earthen mounds. However, by the 11th century, stone architecture had begun to rapidly dominate throughout medieval Europe. In the 12th century, builders learned to erect colossal stone towers with walls up to 5 meters thick. Despite this, in 1250 these fortresses remained primarily military structures rather than comfortable residences. The main problem was that the massive stone walls perfectly absorbed and retained the winter cold. If you happened to touch the interior wall of a castle in 1250, it would feel like solid ice. The unprotected stone acts like a giant reverse-action battery, continuously drawing heat away from all living things. These rooms lack any form of insulation, such as modern drywall or wood paneling. The thick lime plaster over the rough stones always remains very damp and icy to the touch. Your warm breath instantly turns into a thick white cloud of steam right in the middle of the living room. This freezing atmosphere remained virtually unchanged throughout the long winter months. In 1250, window openings were yet another inexhaustible source of constant physical suffering. Clear window glass was an incredibly expensive luxury that only the wealthiest kings could afford. Most windows in a typical medieval castle were simply narrow vertical slits for archery. These open openings allowed a constant and fierce stream of icy winter air to flow unimpeded inside. People tried to seal them with heavy wooden shutters or pieces of oiled, thick fabric. However, the strong wind still found every tiny crack and whistled loudly in the darkness. The constant drafts inside the medieval stone fortress moved like invisible icy rivers. They blew freely beneath heavy doors, through long galleries, and down steep spiral staircases. You could not find a single corner where the surrounding air remained completely still. Your skin felt the aggressive movement of this cold, damp night wind every minute. It caused all your muscles to tense involuntarily as your exhausted body tried to warm itself. Modern people are completely ill-equipped to cope with such relentless indoor drafts. To better understand the scale of this problem, we can look at the reign of King Henry III in England, around 1250. Preserved royal accounts show that the monarch regularly complained about the terrible cold in his private chambers. He constantly ordered his craftsmen to install additional wooden panels to block the wind. If even the wealthiest rulers suffered from these drafts, ordinary servants fared much worse. They were forced to sleep directly on the bare, cold floor next to drafty corridors. The castle's interior architectural layout only exacerbated this massive thermal disaster of those years. The high vaulted ceilings looked monumental and beautiful, but they trapped all the heat at the very top. Down below, where people actually lived, the air temperature in winter rarely rose above 5 degrees Celsius. The floor slabs were made exclusively of cold stone or tightly compacted raw clay. Walking on such a surface without thick woolen socks was a true physical ordeal. Every attempt to take a step felt like walking across the frozen surface of a winter forest pond. The famous spiral staircases were designed exclusively for military defense and always wound clockwise. Unfortunately, during the winter, these stone shafts acted as perfect wind tunnels. Icy air from the lower courtyards rushed upward through these spirals at tremendous speed. It instantly sucked away the little heat produced by the small fires in the living quarters. As people climbed, they had to contend simultaneously with pitch-black darkness and a furious wind. This ingenious military design turned ordinary daily life into a continuous tactile nightmare. Let's trace how this complex engineering problem evolved over the preceding decades of history. In 1100, fortress builders gave little thought to wall-mounted fireplaces, relying solely on open hearths. They would build a large fire right in the middle of the main hall, from which the smoke escaped through a hole in the roof. By 1200, the first built-in fireplaces with primitive chimneys began to gradually appear in European keep towers. This was a significant step forward compared to the completely smoke-filled rooms of the distant past. Nevertheless, by 1250, these fireplaces were still extremely inefficient. The effective heat from such a fireplace spread over a very limited distance of about 2 meters. Beyond this small warm zone, the icy cold resumed its complete and absolute dominance. Even if you stood facing the fire, your back would still grow cold. Such a sharp temperature contrast often caused severe physical discomfort and muscle cramps. People had to constantly turn around to evenly warm their freezing bodies. Comfortable, even heating throughout the entire house, simply did not exist in the harsh 13th century. This ceaseless and exhausting battle against the wind completely shaped the sensory world of a medieval castle. The loud roar of the storm raging outside served as a constant background noise for every inhabitant of the fortress. The thick stone walls vibrated almost imperceptibly under the blows of the powerful winter storms of those years. You felt trapped inside a huge, cold monument built for war, but not for life. This architectural coldness is only the very first level of suffering you will encounter. In the next chapter, we will examine in detail how people tried to illuminate this dark, freezing world. When the winter sun set below the horizon around 4 p.m., the castle was plunged into thick twilight. In 1250, absolute darkness was a tangible physical presence that completely engulfed the vast rooms. Modern people cannot fully comprehend this pitch-black medieval night without electricity. The only available means of combating it were open fires and very primitive candles. However, artificial light was expensive, and its overall quality was incredibly poor. It would take a long time for your eyes to adjust to a world of constant, flickering shadows. Wealthy feudal lords used expensive candles made of natural beeswax for lighting. They burned relatively cleanly, produced no soot, and filled the air with a pleasant, light scent of honey. However, a single such wax candle cost more than an ordinary laborer earned in several days. To light the rooms of servants and rank-and-file soldiers, people used only tallow candles. These were made from melted animal fat and gave off a very dim, dirty, yellowish light. A typical tallow candle illuminated a space only within a 1-meter radius around itself. The pungent smell of burning animal fat is one of the most vivid sensory characteristics of the year 1250. This heavy smoke quickly coated the throat from the inside and made the eyes water profusely. The fat melted too quickly, requiring constant attention to trim the smoldering wick. If you forgot to do this in time, the candle would begin to emit thick clouds of black soot. This greasy soot settled on expensive furniture, stone walls, and your own skin. By the end of a cold winter evening, absolutely everyone smelled like an old kitchen hearth. To illuminate the large space of the main hall, heavy iron torch brackets were mounted on the walls. The torches themselves were made of dry, resinous wood or bundles of hemp soaked in tar. They provided relatively bright light, but produced a colossal amount of toxic, thick smoke. The air in the castle hall quickly became so thick that it was hard to breathe. Examine historical accounts from the early 12th century to see just how much people complained about this. The mixture of acrid smoke and darkness remained a constant threat to lung health. The smoke from the enormous central fireplace often had nowhere to go but up. In 1250, chimneys were built without regard for the laws of physics and suffered from backdrafts. During severe winter storms, the wind would blow the smoke back into the fortress's living quarters. The entire hall would fill with a thick gray haze that severely irritated the respiratory tract. The castle's inhabitants coughed almost constantly, and chronic lung diseases were commonplace. You would quickly find yourself trying to breathe in the air near the cold windows. This combination of freezing cold and thick gray smoke created a paradoxical sensory situation. To completely rid the space of the suffocating smoke, one had to open the wooden window shutters. But opening these shutters immediately let in the freezing wind and stinging winter snow. Every evening, the fortress's inhabitants had to choose between freezing from the cold or suffocating from the smoke. Most people preferred to endure the acrid soot in order to preserve the precious remnants of indoor warmth. Let's trace the history of lighting technology over the centuries to understand this progress. As far back as the 9th century, people relied primarily on open oil lamps and pitch torches. By the 11th century, tallow candles had become more affordable and widespread in northern homes. During the reign of King Louis IX of France, around 1250, candle production became a strictly regulated trade. This municipal organization slightly improved the fat purification process, but did not make candles any cheaper. Artificial light remained a precious resource that strictly dictated people's nighttime routines. Due to the strict limits on lighting, people performed almost all their work in semi-darkness. Reading a rare manuscript or mending winter clothing required sitting right next to a smoldering candle. Constant, intense eye strain led to very early vision loss among many medieval citizens. In the deep black shadows of the castle's corners, it was impossible to make out even large objects. A person could easily trip over a sleeping dog or an uneven stone in the floor. This dark environment instilled in people a sense of constant anxiety and hidden danger. Long black shadows cast by the flickering torchlight danced wildly across the uneven stone walls. This constant visual instability had a profound effect on the psyche, making people more superstitious. Every dark corner seemed to be the lair of evil spirits or real physical enemies. The loud rustling of rats scurrying behind the wall hangings only intensified this mental strain. You would spend your entire evening with your senses of hearing and sight, constantly on high alert. It was an exhausting experience that completely drained the human mind long before sleep set in. Thus, the evening hours inside a medieval citadel were far from cozy or peaceful. You sat in a cold, smoky room by the light of a single, foul-smelling candle. Your eyes stung from the acrid soot, and your ears picked up the frightening sounds of the night. This dark, suffocating reality was merely a necessary prelude to the main winter supper. In the next chapter, we will analyze in detail exactly what people ate on those cold nights. We will see how food provided the body with calories for the struggle for survival that lay ahead. The winter dinner in the Great Hall was the central social event of the entire day at the castle. In the cold month of December 1250, the festive menu depended entirely on the supplies from the autumn harvest. Fresh meat was extremely rare, as livestock had been slaughtered back in November to conserve feed. People were forced to subsist on salted beef, dried fish, and old smoked lard. These tough ingredients were simmered for hours on end in huge iron cauldrons to tenderize them. The resulting thick stews were very salty and completely devoid of beneficial fresh vitamins. The main sensory shock of a medieval winter meal begins with the incredible speed at which the food cooled. Since it was very cold inside the hall, hot food turned to ice in a matter of minutes. The thick layer of animal fat on your plate would solidify into a white, rubbery layer by the middle of the meal. Consuming cold, sticky mutton fat in a dark room is an extremely unpleasant physiological experience. The texture of the food became repulsive, and an excess of salt began to dominate the overall flavor. You had to swallow your food very quickly before it froze completely. To reliably mask the unpleasant taste of spoiled food or excessive salt, medieval chefs used tons of spices. Hefty doses of hot mustard, black pepper, dried ginger, and cloves were added to all sauces. These exotic spices were expensive and served as an important indicator of the castle lord's high status. However, they also severely irritated the stomach lining and caused chronic gastritis. Such an intense flavor profile would come as a real shock to our pampered modern palates. Plain bread was the absolute foundation of the entire winter diet, providing the bulk of the calories. For the highest nobility, the castle bakers baked white wheat bread of the highest quality. Ordinary servants and rank-and-file guards ate coarse, dark bread made from a mixture of rye and barley. This winter bread was often baked weeks in advance and became hard as a rock. Diners had to soak these tough crusts for a long time in beer or hot broth. People's drinking habits in 1250 were entirely dictated by the lack of clean drinking water. Absolutely everyone drank only ale or wine, both of which were consumed in enormous quantities. Winter wine was often sour and cloudy after long months of transport in oak barrels. To make it drinkable, the wine was heated with spices and sugar. This hot drink gave a person a brief, false sense of warmth and comfort. However, the alcohol also caused rapid dehydration, leaving the body vulnerable to the nighttime cold. The tableware used during the feast posed a huge hidden health hazard. While the Lord himself ate from pure silver, the more humble guests used pewter cups. In 1250, pewter was an alloy with a very high content of toxic lead. Sour winter wine and hot sauces containing vinegar caused the lead to leach actively into the food. Over time, this constant chemical exposure led to severe chronic lead poisoning among the entire elite. It caused excruciating abdominal pain, neurological disorders, and severely compromised the immune system. Let's trace how the nobility's dietary structure changed chronologically over the past centuries. Back in the 9th century, the warrior's diet was as simple as possible and consisted of local game. By the 11th century, trade routes had expanded, bringing the first eastern spices to the northern stone fortresses. In the mid-13th century, the first cookbooks began to codify in detail the complex rules for preparing sauces. This evolution shows that people sought solace in food while the architecture remained icy. Nevertheless, no culinary art could save a meat stew from freezing. General table manners differed radically from our familiar notions of hygiene. Absolutely everyone ate exclusively with their fingers, a large spoon, and a knife. Dining forks were considered a strange Byzantine quirk and were practically unused in 1250. Each guest unabashedly plunged their unwashed hands into shared deep bowls. This practice contributed to the rapid spread of dangerous intestinal bacteria and parasites among those present. The leftovers from this lavish dinner were never simply thrown into the regular trash. Stale bread plates, which had soaked up meat juices and fat, were collected by servants after the feast. At the end of the evening, these greasy pieces of bread were handed over to a special castle official for charitable purposes. They were distributed at the main gate to the poor and hungry local peasants from the neighboring village. This distribution system helped the poorest segments of the population survive during the cold season. As dinner drew to a close, heavy odors lingered under the hall's ceiling for a long time. The scent of congealed fat, spilled sour ale, and burnt spices dominated the air. The fleeting warmth from the mulled wine quickly faded, leaving you alone with the night. The temperature in the castle continued to drop rapidly as midnight approached, and the feast came to an end. It was time to make your way through the dark, cold corridors toward your bedchamber. In the next chapter, we'll follow this path up the stairs and take a look at the bedroom. Leaving the relatively warm area around the main fireplace becomes a painful physical ordeal for your body. You head into the dark stone corridors that lead to the upper residential towers. The air here grows significantly colder and reeks of centuries-old dampness and decay. Your footsteps echo loudly off the bare stone steps of the spiral staircase. The single candle in your hands flickers violently in the fortress's powerful interior drafts. Every stone surface you accidentally touch is covered with an icy damp film. This perpetual dampness was one of the castle's most debilitating sensory factors. In 1250, builders had not yet mastered the art of creating waterproof barriers to protect the walls. Autumn rains and melting winter snow seeped unhindered into the structure's outer stone masonry. The interior lime plaster remained constantly wet, creating ideal conditions for fungal growth. Black and green toxic mold covered vast areas of the walls directly behind the decorative tapestries. Heavy woolen tapestries were hung on the walls to protect against the cold and wind. However, these dense fabrics acted like giant sponges, absorbing all the moisture in the castle. They quickly became wet, heavy, and began to emit a persistent, suffocating odor of decay. Touching such a medieval tapestry in winter was an extremely unpleasant and slimy experience. The fabric never dried out completely due to the complete lack of proper ventilation. This damp and dark environment was a perfect paradise for the castle's true inhabitants, rodents. Thousands of rats and mice lived inside the walls, under the floors, and in the thatched roofs. In 1250, people viewed the constant presence of these animals as a completely natural part of life. When you walk into your bedroom, you immediately hear the characteristic rustling of little paws. Rats often gnawed through expensive clothing, destroyed food supplies, and ruined leather shoes. Their droppings added a pungent ammonia smell to the atmosphere of a closed, unventilated room. Far more dangerous creatures were the invisible parasitic insects that lived in every piece of fabric. Bed bugs, fleas, and clothes lice were constant companions of all social classes. They thrived in straw mattresses, woolen blankets, and the seams of your clothing. In 1250, medicine had not yet discovered that insects carried deadly infections. The painful bites of castle fleas caused excruciating itching and severe skin inflammation in people. You would spend the entire night in futile attempts to relieve the bites. Your winter clothing offered no reliable protection against these insects or the cold. People wore several layers of heavy woolen cloth, linen undergarments, and fur capes. However, natural wool instantly absorbs moisture from the cold air of a damp stone room. After a couple of days in the castle, all your clothes would become heavy and damp. Wearing wet wool led to painful rashes and sores on the skin. Let's briefly examine the chronological development of castle bedrooms in European history over the past centuries. As far back as the 10th century, soldiers and servants slept together on the floor of the main hall. By the 11th century, wealthy lords began building the first private chambers on the upper levels of the towers. By 1250, these private rooms had become the norm, but they remained terribly cold places. It wasn't until the 14th century that builders began to line the walls with dry wooden panels on a large scale. Thus, the mid-13th century was a transitional era of architectural discomfort for people. The overall smell of a medieval bedroom was a complex bouquet of extremely unpleasant odors. It combined the smell of wet wool, the heavy stench of mold, and traces of rodent activity. The situation was exacerbated by the fact that many living quarters were located next to closets. A wardrobe in those days was essentially a primitive outhouse with an opening to the street. A cold wind often blew back through this opening, spreading the awful smell throughout the bedroom. This crushing assault on the sense of smell made it impossible for anyone to relax quickly and fall asleep peacefully. The complete lack of the usual privacy only intensified the overall psychological tension of that winter evening. Even in a private room, you often slept alongside your servants or guards. Everyone huddled together, trying to share the warmth of their bodies. The sounds of heavy breathing, coughing, and scratching filled the room until morning. Standing in the middle of this dark bedroom, you realize the inevitability of the night's most grueling ordeal. The fire in your room's small fireplace is rapidly dying down, turning into dim embers. The candle has almost completely melted away, and the room is plunged into the icy, impenetrable twilight of the night. The cold grows increasingly relentless, causing your entire body to shiver uncontrollably. Now you must lie down in this icy bed and endure the midnight chill. In the next chapter, we'll describe in detail the process of sleeping in this freezing trap. Attempting to lie down in a medieval bed in January 1250 requires desperate courage. The bed itself consists of a heavy oak frame with a straw mattress. The linen sheets, from their long exposure to dampness, feel like chunks of real river ice. Under no circumstances do you take off your clothes, as that would guarantee you'd freeze. You remain clad in a thick woolen tunic, heavy stockings, and even an outer fur cloak. The first tactile sensation upon contact with the sheet makes your teeth chatter loudly. Heavy woolen blankets press down on your chest like a massive, immovable boulder. This weight creates only the illusion of protection, but it does not provide instant warmth to your limbs. Your body has to expend enormous amounts of energy to warm up this icy bed. For the first hour, you lie completely still, curled up into a tight, tense ball. Any careless movement exposes your body to a new, cold patch of the sheet. To combat this nighttime chill in any way possible, people devised primitive tricks. Faithful servants might place stones or clay bricks heated over a fire at your feet. These hot objects provided a little warmth for the first hour, then cooled completely. Another popular solution was to use very thick fabric curtains around the entire bed. These canopies were designed solely to trap a person's warm breath inside a small enclosed space. Inside this enclosed fabric box, the air very quickly becomes stuffy, heavy, and humid. You are forced to breathe your own carbon dioxide mixed with the smells of unwashed wool and old straw. Moisture from your breath condenses on the cold curtains, turning into tiny droplets of water. This damp warmth instantly awakens the hungry fleas and bedbugs hiding inside the mattress. They become extremely active and begin to bite your skin mercilessly under the blanket. Your night turns into an exhausting struggle between freezing and insect bites. About 2 hours after midnight, the temperature inside the stone tower reaches its lowest point. The fire in the room's fireplace has completely died out, leaving behind only a pile of gray ash. The bare stone walls continue to radiate an icy chill, dropping the room temperature to 0 degrees. If you suddenly need to use the restroom, this experience will feel like a real nightmare. You'll be forced to leave the warmth of your bed and step onto the icy floor. Walking through the dark room sends a powerful shock through your entire nervous system. A trip to the bathroom in the middle of a winter night is an unforgettable negative sensory experience. An icy wind blows upward from below, straight through the stone shaft from the frozen moat. This frosty air instantly gives you goosebumps and makes you shiver violently from the cold. Toilet paper as we know it didn't exist back then, so people used bundles of dry straw. The pungent smell of human waste mixes with the damp night fog and completely fills this small space. Let's examine the chronological evolution of medieval sleeping arrangements to understand the broader historical picture. Way back in the 8th century, ancient warriors slept on simple wooden benches along the walls of a hall. By the 11th century, European nobility had invented the first wooden beds with removable soft mattresses. By the mid-1300s, these four-poster beds had become incredibly expensive objects of pride for the lords. Thus, the bed of 1250 was a key technology for human physical survival in winter. Without these thick curtains, cases of frostbite from hypothermia would have been common. The complete lack of deep, restful sleep quickly saps your last reserves of physical strength. Your brain is constantly on high alert due to the perpetual discomfort and cold. You wake up literally every 30 minutes to adjust the blanket or scratch a flea bite. The eerie sound of the wind outside the window constantly reminds you of the hostility of the outside world. You can clearly hear the wooden roof beams creaking under the weight of the winter snow. Severe hypothermia remained a constant, deadly threat to the elderly and young children during these hours. If body temperature dropped too low, the heart would slow its beat, and death would follow. Medieval chronicles record high infant mortality rates, specifically on cold January nights in stone towers. To survive, people often took large hunting dogs to bed with them. These loyal animals shared their natural body heat with the freezing human all night long. This method saved thousands of lives throughout many harsh centuries of history. As the clock nears 5 a.m., the deep darkness of night begins to slowly fade. Your body feels completely exhausted, and your muscles are stiff from the hard straw. You have managed to survive the most terrifying and coldest hours of this long winter night. However, the approaching morning will bring you very little pleasant relief or the comforts of home. The transition to wakefulness will require fresh physical effort from you in the freezing confines of the castle. In the next chapter, we'll take a detailed look at all the characteristics of a medieval winter dawn. The first pale rays of the winter sun penetrate the icy room through the cracks in the shutters around 7 o'clock. You wake up feeling even more physically exhausted than you did last night. Your joints are completely numb, and your muscles ache severely from the constant strain of the night. Getting out of bed feels like an act of true violence against your exhausted body. The air around you remains frosty, and your breath once again forms white wisps of steam. There is no warm bath or hot water here to quickly bring you back to life. Even the simple act of washing your face in the morning requires you to first break the thin crust of ice in the pitcher. This icy water delivers a sharp thermal shock to your skin, and your fingers turn red in seconds. The soap we're used to didn't exist back then, so people used plain water. Your skin quickly becomes dry and covered with painful cracks from this kind of care. The castle servants are already running through the corridors, trying to start a fire with dry kindling. Living in such conditions for long periods took a heavy toll on people's physical health. Terrible diseases such as chronic rheumatism, severe arthritis, and lung infections were widespread. Studies of skeletal remains in 13th century cemeteries reveal severe joint deterioration, even in young people. Constant dampness and cold ravaged the human body in just a couple of decades of active life. Because of this wear and tear, medieval people looked significantly older than their actual age. You would have become a frail invalid in just a few winters in this citadel. Let's trace how the architecture of European castles evolved in chronological order over the following centuries. In 1300, builders began reducing the size of living quarters to conserve heat more effectively. By 1400, the widespread use of brick made it possible to build walls that were denser and better protected against drafts. During the reign of King Louis XI of France, in 1461, palaces began to be equipped with tiled stoves. These engineering innovations completely transformed the sensory experience of winter living for Europe's highest-ranking aristocracy. However, the unfortunate residents of 1250 could only dream of such home heating technologies. The typical daily routine at the castle began immediately after the morning mandatory service in the chapel. All the castle's inhabitants would gather again in the Great Hall, which remained cold and smoky. Breakfast was as simple as possible, consisting of a piece of bread and leftovers from the previous night's dinner. All of this was washed down with a mug of warm ale, which provided the body with its first quick calories. You felt a brief rush of warmth from the alcohol, which was quickly replaced by the familiar morning chill. This sensory account of one winter night vividly reveals to us the true cost of elite medieval life. It was an existence built entirely on a compromise between military security and excruciating physical discomfort. Monumental stone towers were built to successfully defend against enemy sieges and assaults. They were never designed as comfortable or healthy spaces for the human body to inhabit. The beautiful myths about noble knights in shining armor completely ignore wet socks and coughs. The sounds of a morning in the castle were a raucous mix of human labor and animal cries. You could hear the neighing of horses in the stables, the blows of woodcutters' axes, and the cries of birds. Heavy iron keys clanked loudly in their locks as the guards opened the fortress's main gates. Cooks shouted at one another in the kitchen complex, preparing enormous cauldrons for lunch. This acoustic scene was lively, chaotic, and completely devoid of any mechanical sounds. The olfactory experience of that winter morning was no less complex and jarring to a modern nose. The fresh, frosty air from the open gates mingled with the acrid stench from the cesspools. The first whiffs of meat roasting on a spit began to drift from the kitchen wing across the lower courtyard. The persistent and suffocating smell of wet woolen clothing remained a constant companion for everyone present in the hall. This palette of smells was the absolute norm for people in 1250, who knew no alternative. Consider the complex political situation in Europe during this specific historical period. In 1250, Frederick II, the powerful Holy Roman Emperor, died, plunging the region into chaos. Castle owners were obliged to maintain a constant state of combat readiness against attacks by their neighbors. Because of these military threats, the defensive function of architecture always took precedence over domestic comfort and luxury. A warmer, cozier castle would have had thin walls, defenseless against enemy catapults. The bitter cold was the inevitable price to pay for personal safety in this brutal world. As our detailed exploration of the medieval dawn draws to a close, the full picture of survival becomes clear. You managed to stay alive through that one winter night, but your body is exhausted. This harrowing experience makes us truly appreciate the comforts and technologies of our modern daily lives. The sensory world of our distant ancestors was brutal, unforgiving, and demanded immense physical resilience. In this final section, we'll briefly summarize our extraordinary journey through the centuries. We'll bid a final farewell to the cold stones of the distant year 1250. Our sensory journey into the freezing winter night of 1250 has come to its logical conclusion. We were able to personally experience the biting drafts, the foul-smelling tallow candles, and the frozen linen sheets of the tower. This historical study proves that the past was an extremely uncomfortable place for the human body. Modern popular culture romanticizes the Middle Ages far too much, showing us only beautiful dresses and balls. In real life, everyday existence was a grueling and exhausting battle against dampness and cold. The people who survived in these harsh castles possessed an incredible level of physical endurance. They genuinely accepted mold, fleas, and congealed fat as perfectly normal parts of daily life. Their sensory expectations were radically different from our modern, inflated standards of domestic comfort. A single smelly candle was enough to light their way, and a smoky fireplace was considered an excellent source of heat. This contrast helps us see just how much our species has changed its relationship with the environment. We have built an ideal world of comfortable temperatures at the flick of a switch. When we examine the historical timeline, we see that this progress was a very slow process. It took humanity many centuries of architectural experimentation to transform stone refrigerators into warm homes. Every improvement in heating technology or window design directly saved thousands of lives. The unfortunate inhabitants of 1250 paid for our present-day comfort with their ruined health. Their daily suffering is a vital part of the great history of human architecture and survival. We must remember their resilience when we look at the beautiful ruins today. Thank you very much for joining us on this in-depth journey through the cold halls of history. If you enjoyed this detailed, immersive analysis, please leave a comment and subscribe to the channel. Let us know if you personally think you could have endured even one such night. The cold stones of the distant year 1250 are now slowly dissolving into the dark mists of a bygone era. The fierce wind outside the fortress walls is dying down, and the tallow candle is finally burning out. You can safely return to your warm room, your soft bed, and turn on the running water. The past remains a magnificent place for mental excursions, but a very poor place for real life. Sleep in warmth, appreciate the comforts of home, and remember the true cost of survival in a castle.